August 17, 1974. A fisherman named Curtis Webb drove to his brother's garage in Adams County, Mississippi, expecting a quiet Sunday morning of coffee and bookkeeping. What he found instead was his brother Marcus lying dead across his desk, blood soaking through accounting ledgers, radio still playing gospel music to a corpse. By sunset that day, investigators would discover 10 more bodies scattered across 3 Mississippi counties. The perpetrators? Not the Dixie Mafia, not drug runners. 5 members of the same family, a father and his 4 sons, moving through the darkness like soldiers on a mission they'd rehearsed. But here's what makes this different from every other massacre you've heard about. 4 days after 11 men died, when FBI agents and state police surrounded the Carter property expecting a standoff, maybe even a final shootout, they found Luther Carter sitting on his front porch drinking coffee, unarmed, waiting. His 4 sons standing behind him in a line, hands visible, calm as Sunday morning churchgoers. Because this wasn't about escaping justice. This was about an oath sworn on the banks of the Mississippi River, an oath that demanded blood, and Luther Carter was a man who kept his word no matter what it cost. If you're ready to hear how a $240 poker debt became 11 funerals, stay with me. But I warn you, this story will make you question where honor ends and horror begins. Luther James Carter was 58 years old that August, though he looked older. 6 feet tall, with the lean, hard build of a man who'd worked physical labor his entire life. His face was weathered like old leather, creased from squinting into sawdust and southern sun for 4 decades. Gray hair cut military short, a habit from Korea he'd never broken, and hands permanently stained with tree resin and motor oil. A scar ran across his right forearm, pink and ropey, from where a chain had snapped back in 1963. Every morning at 5 a.m., Luther woke without an alarm, made coffee in a percolator, ate 2 pieces of white bread with grape jelly while standing at the kitchen counter. Then he'd walk out to the sawmill he operated on his 12-acre property on Morgantown Road. Small operation, just him and his 4 sons cutting pine and oak for local construction. They'd built the mill themselves in 1959, piece by piece, scavenging equipment from failed operations. Luther had married Evelyn May Thornton in 1940. She died of breast cancer in 1971. 3 years later, he still set 2 coffee cups on the counter every morning before remembering she was gone. They'd had 4 sons, Thomas, 33, the oldest and steadiest, Jacob, 31, who had his mother's quick temper, William, 28, quiet and methodical, and Daniel, 25, who'd served in Vietnam and come back different in ways hard to define but impossible to ignore. What Luther valued most wasn't the 12 acres or the sawmill or even the house he'd built with his own hands. What he valued was the idea that a man's word created a bond stronger than any legal contract, that your family name meant something, that when you made a promise you kept it because your reputation was the foundation everything else was built on. In August 1974, the sawmill was barely breaking even. Lumber prices were down, construction had slowed. Luther had $3,200 in the bank and owed $1,800 to suppliers. He wasn't desperate yet, but he could see that cliff approaching. The catalyst came on Thursday night, August 15th, at a poker game in Marcus Webb's kitchen. 7 men around a table under a bare bulb that cast harsh shadows. Ray Morrison, Vernon Hartley, Jacob Carter, and a few others from the area. Nothing illegal, just neighbors playing cards, drinking beer, talking about nothing important. Stakes were small, $5 and $10 pots, rarely more than 50. By midnight, Ray Morrison was down $240. Not a fortune, but not nothing either. Roughly a week's wages at the diesel shop where he worked. He'd been drinking since he arrived, and his judgment had followed the same downward trajectory as his chip stack. Jacob Carter, Luther's 3rd son, was the big winner, up almost $300. At 12:40 a.m., Ray stood up from the table, chair scraping loud. "I'm tapped out," he said, voice slightly slurred, face flushed from alcohol and frustration. "You settling up?" Jacob asked. "Simple question, standard procedure. I'm good for it. You know I'm good for it. I'll get you the money next week." Jacob nodded. "All right, next Thursday here at Marcus's." Yeah, next Thursday, but Thursday, August 22nd came and went. Ray Morrison didn't show up, didn't call, didn't send word. Jacob waited until 10:30, then drove home and told his father what happened. Luther's response was simple and cold. Then you go collect what's owed. Friday afternoon, Jacob drove to the Morrison property, found Ray working under his truck in the yard, replacing the starter. It was 6:45, still hot, the sun low but bright. "Ray, I'm here about the $240 you owe me." Ray rolled out from under the truck, looked up at him. "I don't got it right now." "When?" "I don't know. When I get it." "That wasn't the deal, Ray." Ray stood up, wiping his hands on a rag already black with grease. "You know what? I'm tired of you Carters acting like you're better than everyone else. It's $240. I'll pay you when I damn well feel like paying you." Jacob's jaw tightened. "My father's going to want to hear about this." "Then go tell him," Ray said, and he spit in the red dirt between them. Not at Jacob's feet exactly, but close enough that the meaning was clear. At 8:15 that evening, Luther and his 4 sons arrived at the Morrison property in 2 trucks. Ray was still in the yard, now sitting on the porch drinking a beer with his brother Bobby and brother-in-law Vernon. Linda, Ray's pregnant wife, was visible through the screen door cooking dinner. Luther approached the porch, calm, controlled. "Ray, we need to discuss the debt you owe my son." "Not tonight, Luther." "Yes, tonight. You made a promise. You broke it. That's not acceptable." Ray stood up. "You know what's not acceptable? You bringing your whole family here like some kind of damn army over $200. $240, Luther corrected. "And it's not about the money. It's about your word." Ray stepped off the porch. Bobby and Vernon stood too, sensing the shift in atmosphere. "My word? You Carters think you're some kind of royalty around here. Well, you're not. You're just poor white trash running a second-rate sawmill, pretending you're something you're not." The words cut deeper than any knife could have. Luther's face remained expressionless, but his sons saw his right hand slowly curl into a fist. "Ray, I'm going to give you one chance to apologize and settle this debt like a man. Or what? Or there will be consequences you don't want." Ray laughed, short and bitter. "Consequences? You threatening me, old man?" Then he did something that crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. He spit directly at Luther's feet, the saliva landing on the toe of Luther's worn work boot. "That's what I think of your consequences." Thomas Carter started forward, but Luther held up his hand, stopping him. Luther looked at Ray Morrison for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, "You just made the worst mistake of your life." The Carters left, drove back to Luther's property in silence. At 11:20 that night, Luther gathered his 4 sons and led them down to the river, to a small clearing where the Mississippi moved past with its eternal indifferent current. The moon was 3/4 full, reflecting off the black water. Luther stood with his 4 sons in a semicircle. He'd brought a Bible, not because he was particularly religious, but because oaths needed weight. "Boys," he said, "we've been disrespected in a way that can't be answered with words. Ray Morrison has shown he has no honor, no integrity. But he's not alone. His family stood by him. They backed his disrespect. So this isn't just about Ray. This is about everyone who thinks they can treat us like we don't matter." "What are you saying, Dad?" Thomas asked. Luther looked at each of his sons in turn. "I'm saying we make them understand that when you cross a line with this family, there's a price. We find Ray Morrison. We find everyone who was with him tonight. We find everyone who owes us respect. And we collect that debt the only way men like them understand." "All of them?" William asked, the quiet one, the one who thought things through. "All of them," Luther confirmed. "We do this as a family. We do this right. We do this so that no one ever disrespects a Carter again." Daniel, the youngest, the one who'd seen combat in Vietnam, spoke up. "Dad, you're talking about killing people." "I'm talking about restoring honor," Luther said. "Now each of you place your hand on this Bible. We're going to swear an oath, and when a Carter swears an oath, he keeps it no matter what." One by one, they placed their hands on the worn leather cover, and Luther spoke words that would transform a family disagreement into a massacre that would haunt Mississippi for decades. What none of them understood, standing there by the river with moonlight on the water and righteousness in their hearts, was that the oath they were swearing would end with 11 men dead, their own family destroyed, and a legacy of violence that would define their name forever. Over the next 36 hours, the Carter family moved through Adams County like ghosts. Ray Morrison shot in his living room while watching television. Bobby Morrison, killed at his apartment 6 weeks before his wedding. Vernon Hartley, executed in his trailer. Marcus Webb, found dead over his accounting books. Eddie Simmons, shot in his hallway 6 feet from his son's bedroom. Frank Reed, killed on his porch with a whiskey bottle in his hand. 4 more whose only crime was being present at that poker game or standing with Ray Morrison when he spit at Luther's feet. 11 men total, 11 families destroyed, all because one man refused to pay a poker debt and another man decided that disrespect demanded death. When Sheriff Bullock and FBI agent Delaney arrived at the Carter property 4 days later, Luther was waiting on his porch. Unarmed, calm, his son standing behind him. "Sheriff," Luther said, "I expect you're here about last Saturday night. We're not going to make this difficult," Luther continued. "We did what we felt we had to do. Now we'll face what comes next." As Bullock put the handcuffs on Luther, he asked, "Was it worth it?" Luther looked at his property one last time. "Ask me in 20 years, if I live that long." Luther Carter served 29 years in Parchman Prison. He died in 2003 at 87 years old. His last words, "Tell my boys I'm proud of them. We kept our oath." His sons, Thomas died in prison. Jacob remains incarcerated at 83, parole denied 4 times. William was paroled after 55 years. Daniel got out after 40 years, then walked into the Gulf of Mexico in 2017 and never came back. His suicide note was 12 words, "I still see them every night." Some oaths cost too much. Sorry, 50 years later, the question remains. Was Luther Carter a murderer who executed 11 innocent men? Or was he a desperate father defending his family's honor in a world that had taken everything else? The answer depends on who you ask, and Adams County still can't agree. If this story made you think about honor, revenge, and the price we pay for keeping our word, leave your like and subscribe. Comment below. Where do you draw the line between defending your family and becoming a monster? Because these stories aren't just history. They're happening right now, somewhere in forgotten places where desperate men decide that blood is the only language left when everything else has failed.